Mics are on. Who do we have on the telephone lines? Trustee Cartner, are you there? Trustee Jacobs? Nope. And Trustee Wendy McPherson is going to be late. So we'll just check back in a few minutes. Okay, I'd like to call to order the November 22nd, 2017 public session. I'm going to ask us to stand for the singing of O Canada. Can I ask you to do roll call, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, trustees. This is our roll call for our meeting of 22 November 2017. Trustee Armour. Present. Vice Chair Carpenter. Trustee Cram.
Present.
Trustee Jacobs.
Present.
Trustee Wendy McPherson. Trustee Bill McPherson.
Present.
Trustee McAllister.
Present.
Second Vice Chair McDonald.
Present.
Chair McMillan.
Present.
Trustee Richards.
Present.
Trustee Swan.
Present.
Student Trustee Marshall Wilson.
Present.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. I need a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board approve consent agenda items 3.02 to 3.03, November 22nd, 2017, as submitted. Moved by Trustee McAllister, seconded by Trustee Richards. And cast your votes, please.
Hi, it's Carol here.
Just came on.
Thank you. You still have the screen turned on? No. On the side?
Is this first day?
It's a new screen. Second meeting. And that carries. Thank you very much. Are there any conflict of interest declarations? Seeing there are none, we're moving on to a report from the private session of November the 8th, 2017. There were three motions. The first motion, I need a mover and a seconder for, that the Upper Canada District School Board approve resolution number PS 217, November the 8th, -002, carried in committee of the whole private session under agenda item D.2, November the 8th, 2017. Do I have a mover?
Carol.
Thank you. That was Trustee Cartner, seconded by Trustee McAllister. I'll ask you to cast your votes on that, please. Trustee Swan?
I'm in favor. I'm just not getting into work.
Okay, thank you. That carries. The second motion that the Upper Canada District School Board approve resolution number PS 217, November the 8th, -003, carried in the committee of the whole private session Under agenda item D.3, November the 8th, 2017. Again, I need a mover. Trustee Richards, Trustee Cram. I ask you to cast your votes on that, please. And that, Trustee Richards?
Yeah.
Thank you. That carries. The third motion, that the Upper Canada District School Board approve resolution number PS 217, November 8th-004. Carry in the Committee of the Whole private session under agenda item D.3, November the 8th, 2017. Moved by Trustee Bill McPherson and seconded by Trustee Swan. I ask you to cast your votes, please. And that carries. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to our next item. This is a delegation that was coming forward. I'm going to ask in a moment Katie Lex Toniolo to come up. Delegation from Oxford on Rideau. As you're coming forward, I just want to explain to the trustees, we don't have delegations very often, so it's just nice to remind trustees that the delegation will be speaking for 10 minutes. At the conclusion of the 10 minutes, trustees can ask the presenter questions for clarity. It's not there will be no questions to staff or among each other. It's not a debate. It's a matter of just asking for clarity. So, Katie, you understand that questions will come to you for clarity. At the end of that conclusion, we'll just thank everyone and we'll move on. So I'm going to turn this over, Katie, to you.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present our delegation to the board. As you may or may not remember, I was one of the members of a parent group that was working towards showcasing our school, Oxford on Rideau Public School, why it should not be included in the number of schools to be closed. We are here tonight to emphasize that Oxford is our rural school in North Grenville, and that the current plan to close in 2018, pending space being available at South Branch, does not align with the province's new vision of rural education, nor is in the best interest of our students and community. As a brief recap, before we start into our presentation material for tonight, during the pupil accommodation review last year, we showed why Oxford was needed for North Grenville. We showed that following consolidation, utilization of the North Grenville schools would be at 105%. This is now 108%, we have recently learned. We showed that Kemptville is growing and continues to grow, with 2,200 new homes projected in the northwest quadrant alone. We showed how the PAR guidelines indicate balancing enrollment or changing boundaries before closing schools, and we also highlighted shortcomings of the PAR process, all of which were acknowledged by the ministry, and we all know that the PAR have been discarded and a new process is being determined, which we will talk about later. Our group made 4 presentations to the ARC and 3 presentations directly to you, our trustees. There was community support for Oxford on Rideau and overwhelming support for rural schools in general, and a strong opposition to portables. The final report acknowledged the aversion to portables and stated, any consolidation strategy should avoid the use of portables to the greatest extent. Oxford was voted to close September 2018, pending space being available at South Branch Public School. So let's talk about space. We all know that the high school is bursting at the seams and using some of South Branch to accommodate the high school students. This means that the only way to close Oxford is to find a way for the high school students to receive their education outside of South Branch. And this means either portables, the portables that are to be avoided, or in addition to the high school. Adding portables is creating space, not space being available. We also know that part of the overcapacity issue at the high school is the way the ministry funds capital expenditures. They fund for enrollment now, not projected enrollment. This has been expressed by senior staff to our group several times as a shortcoming of capital expenditures and the ministry. Therefore, making decisions based on today's numbers doesn't work in North Grenville. So, Building for the Future took the approach that looking at future enrollment in 2029 was the right approach, and that projected dwindling enrollment in North Grenville to the extent that a 4th elementary school would not be necessary. But the problem is that Kemptville and North Grenville are not growing in the expected way. we underprojected enrollment for 2017-2018 by almost 3%. Recall that we will already be over capacity if Oxford is closed. There's no room for 3% uncertainty in our estimations. Our brand new KPS has opened with portables, and there's already talk of expansion to accommodate a daycare. So yes, if we remove the high school students from South Branch by putting them in portables, there would be room today to accommodate Oxford students. But in no time, there won't be, and we will need more portables in addition to accommodate these children. Further, the dual track and boundary changes that are taking place next year, in addition to the grandfathering we've been told will be happening, will make estimating numbers at each school very challenging. What happens if all current South Branch parents decide to keep their children there, but those previous KPS students whose boundaries changed to South Branch decide to move schools, or vice versa? Why not allow those changes to take place and let the water settle before adding another change into the mix? As you are aware, the province undertook a province-wide rural engagement in the spring of 2017. They had several meetings that allowed students, parents, communities, municipal governments, and school boards to come together to discuss rural and northern education. Following those sessions, as well as online surveys and written submissions, the province released their plan to strengthen rural and northern education. This plan aims to strengthen processes around school closures, exactly the weaknesses that we had addressed through the PAR last school year, and increase funding to rural schools. We don't have the time tonight to go through that whole plan, but we wanted to highlight a few points. In the plan, there is discussion about incentivizing boards to share space, planning, and strengthening the PARG. It comments that proposals that involve rural schools will be prioritized for capital funding, and they encourage maximizing opportunities of co-locations, especially in rural communities. They commented on revising its community planning and partnerships guideline, and specifically highlight the potential for community use of open and underutilized schools. They also acknowledged the flaws in the PARG and discussed the new guidelines would emphasize more collaboration, longer timelines, and clearer roles and responsibilities of those involved. The new PARG would also promote the inclusion of community and focus on student achievement and well-being. Closing schools and moving students into portables does not focus on their well-being. There are continued calls for a moratorium on school closures. Another aspect of the plan to strengthen rural and northern education is the Rural and Northern Education Fund. That funding is to specifically address funding-related issues in rural and northern settings and acknowledge the rural nature of the UCDSB, with our board receiving the largest portion of the $20 million in funding. The goal is to improve education for rural communities, communities like those that Oxford-on-Rideau students are from. While the funding technically includes population centres like Kempville, the document also recognizes that Statistics Canada defines rural as a population centre less than 1,000 and population density less than 400 per square kilometre. So while KPS and South Branch would likely be included in the funding calculations, it's interesting to note that only a school like Oxford is truly rural, and that school boards are to use this funding to support rural education needs, including the operation of rural schools. Oxford is the only rural school in North Grenville, the only true rural school where they are living in rural environments and the parents chose a rural school for their children. Lastly, the plan also talks about pedagogical supports for instruction practice and recognizes the complex nature of rural and northern schools, and that complex environment presents an opportunity to promote and explore student-centered and differentiated learning. The ministry promises to support this learning experience for rural students by strengthening technology-enabled learning opportunities in addition to other things. They also touch on expanding experiential learning opportunities for rural students. Given the amount of programming and robotics in agriculture these days, a perfect opportunity for experiential learning would be to include tech-based learning in a rural school. Excuse me. And this is what we've done. Recall the presentation made to the trustees last February, where Brent and Addison presented the vision for tech-based learning at Oxford-on-Rideau. It was noted that a small rural school was a perfect location to launch such an initiative. It was noted that programming is set to become the new second language, and that there currently aren't enough skilled employees to fill programming positions. They made a presentation with Sphero Spark where they demonstrated how such a device could be used at the elementary level to start kids right from JK learning how to code. It has been so successful. We started with Hour of Code in June of 2017. All students participated and were presented with a certificate at the end saying that they had successfully completed this global movement. They were so pumped, and so were parents and teachers. We have established tech-based learning to complement the curriculum that teachers are working on, and all grades have had 2 sessions, including the Creating Pathway students that attend school at Oxford. This is a group that often gets forgotten, but these are kids that have been moved from school to school and face different challenges than some of the other students. But they are engaged in this. Their teacher told us that this is one of the only things that they look forward to at school. The parents and teachers are very impressed and excited, and the kids are over the moon. They don't even realize that they're learning as they're playing with these robots. And yes, they get to play with robots, as we've had a very successful fundraising campaign, and we're able to raise enough money for 12 Spark robots and 12 covers so they can take them outside as well as paint with them. We will also be bringing parents in 3 times over the year so the students can engage with their parents and show them what they've been learning. If you'd like to come and see what it's all about, we are having a grand opening on Thursday, November 30th from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at Oxford on Rideau. An invitation should have already appeared in your inbox. This is such a great thing for the students, and they are eating it up. In conclusion, Oxford should remain open, at least until an addition is completed at the high school or space is available, not created using portables. We aren't completely unreasonable and realize that at some point it isn't feasible to keep a school open if there are other reasonable alternatives. But the alternatives aren't reasonable at this point. 11 possible portables in North Grenville. 11. North Grenville population continues to increase, and predicting student populations has obviously proven very challenging to date. There's new funding with a focus on rural, truly rural student bodies and sustaining rural schools. The tech-based learning initiative has been extremely successful, and we think Oxford could be a showcase for how to implement in other elementary schools in the future. Ontarians spoke. Rural schools matter. Take this opportunity to hear what they're saying. Take this opportunity to acknowledge that North Grenville is different than the other families of schools. We realized the precedent it would set to remove Oxford from the closure list, but the final decision last year shows that Oxford is different, pending space at South Branch. So let's not create space until a real solution, an addition at the high school, is complete and/or there's space at South Branch. It provides the time needed to see how the population changes over the coming years and things to settle following the programming and boundary changes at the Kemptville schools. We also request to see how this new funding is being used to support the plan laid out in the Plan for Rural and Northern Education, specifically how truly rural schools are benefiting as expected by the ministry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Trustees, any comments or questions regarding, or I shouldn't say comments, questions in terms of clarity? Trustee Bill McPherson?
Is Oxford on the Rideau an independent municipality, or is it a part of the larger North Grenville municipality?
Through you, Chair, it is part of the North Grenville municipality.
So it's not a standalone entity?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing there are none, thank you very much for that presentation. All right, moving on to the next item is we're back into having our schools come and visit us, and for some reason Principal Eric Hardy can't escape us. Seems to always be coming here. I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent Jody Barrett, who is going to introduce Carleton Place High School and their improvement plan for student achievement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This evening I would like to invite Principal Eric Hardy and Vice Principals Rob Bradley and Dan McRae to join us and share the work that is happening at Carleton Place High School. Carleton Place High School is located in the beautiful town of Carleton Place, a thriving municipality in town, and if you've ever had the opportunity to go to this high school, we like to say that they are set in the most beautiful setting in our district, right along the mighty Mississippi River. It's a beautiful spot, but lots of very exciting things are happening, and I look forward to having our principal team share that with you this evening.
Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. So, as Superintendent Barrett said, Carleton Place High School is not surprisingly located in Carleton Place and has been there since 1922, 1924 in our current location. The school has grown to 850 students, so we have 290 intermediate and 560 secondary students at the moment. So it's grown fairly significantly in the time that I've been at the school. The school has 4 specialist high skills major programs, so we have a sports, a health and wellness, an arts and culture, and construction available for students to take. We also benefit from having 35 international students, thanks to the fine work of Superintendent Mills and his team. And we also have a Bear Ambassadors program, which are Canadian students who pair up with international students to help them acclimatize to Canada and go and do activities and things with them. We're very fortunate to have an instrumental music program. We've got 2 instrumental music teachers on staff, so we have instrumental music from grades 7 to 12. If you're in Carleton Place on Saturday night, you will see them in the Santa Claus Parade this weekend. They also have Breakfast with Santa on Saturday morning, which is a great big community event and very popular in town. And the town itself, if you've been by any time recently, you'll see it's expanding at a tremendous rate. So the town has grown to 11,000 people, but there are 2,000 houses slated for building. There's 4 new developments located around the town. So this is the school's EQO data. So we've been working very, very hard on our math scores, and happy to report that we've seen some good progress there. So we've had a 42% increase in our academic math performance over the last 4 years. We've also seen a 28% increase in applied math performance over the last 5 years. The work is, and that improvement has come from great work from the team at CPHS. A lot of collaboration between our 7 and 8 and 9 to 12 teachers. We've been working to rank learning expectations, so we're ensuring that teachers are spending the majority of their time on the most important curricular expectations. We are using a EQO tool to screen early on, so as early as grade 7, we're tracking their performance towards how they're going to do in the grade 9 test. We've been working really hard to create more engaging math classes, and again, we've gotten lots of great professional development from the teams under Superintendent Allen and Superintendent Barrett and their team, and so we've made good use of the strategies they've been bringing to us. We've also been using EQO formatting for tests as well, and we're working hard on improving our literacy test scores, so we went up 9% this year. We've been working again on collaboration in the 7 to 12 and also having cross-curricular discussions. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a moment. We've been really focusing on the reading skills of inferencing and making connections. We're using a reading and writing skills chart, which again we'll share with you shortly. Again, like the math, we've been using EQO formatting for tests so that students are feeling confident and comfortable when they come to that. And also we've been working on co-constructing criteria with students, which basically means you spend time working with the students to figure out what good looks like so they understand what your target is before you get there. Because sometimes we don't get the product we want from students because they're just not clear on what we're looking for.
Thank you, Mr. Hardy. We're just going to talk a little bit about our literacy SIPSA plan here. So we are using our literacy SIPSA to plan, act, assess, and reflect on teaching and learning. There is an overall focus on more explicit instruction. It's important that we're not assuming what students know. We are working on establishing clear baselines using explicit instruction and comparing student work samples to assess and ensure learning. We have adopted the chart above, just up there where it says reading and writing skills, which identifies specific reading and writing skills through the explicit teaching of conventions, developing a main idea with sufficient details, organizing information and ideas in a coherent manner, understanding implicit and explicitly stated instructions, and making connections, we know that students will be better positioned for success as they pursue a secondary school diploma. We are focused on developing literacy skills throughout our whole school by using the chart from grades 7 to 12 and across curricular areas. It will allow us to work together school-wide to ensure enhanced student skill development. The chart also aids in the delivery of professional development, and we know that the use of consistent language from classroom to classroom, teacher to teacher, and student to student will help our struggling learners. Our next step is to help students have a clear sense of their own next steps for reading and writing. We are currently working on this through an early intervention strategy. We're working very closely with our feeder schools to identify student next steps in literacy during the transition process and to plan ahead for students that are struggling and coming to our school. We are also beginning to use the Francis and Pinnell assessment tool to assess student reading in grade 7 and grade 8, and then assigning additional resources to our struggling learners. Finally, we are providing students a CPHS with regular practice using the EQAO format to build confidence and competence for taking those tests in later grades. Thank you, Mr. Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. McRae. So the school has seen a steady increase in math results thanks to deliberate steps taken at both the school and board level. As Mr. Hardy alluded to earlier, the school uses an online tool in order to establish a baseline for EQO performance twice a year with grades 7 through 9. The tool helps highlight areas of strength and weakness and is used in our math SIPSA work to focus staff. The staff work together to rank curricular expectations from 1 to 3, ensuring that teachers spend the most time on the most important expectations. The school has participated actively in PD opportunities provided by the board. Practices we've adopted, thanks to Teaching for Learning, include using more manipulatives in class, using math talk to build comfort and engagement, experimenting with number streams, and using open-ended questions. The majority of applied level students who did not achieve level 3 on the test were at a level 2. One of our observations is that the difference between students who performed at a level 3 and a level 2 was their math confidence. Oftentimes, students who performed level 2 were more likely to say they panicked during the test, or shortly after walking out of the test, they realized answers to questions they had left blank or had gotten wrong. So to that end, we believe regular exposure to EQAO format is important to help develop their confidence and remove any anxiety surrounding the test. So teachers are using EQAO formats in their regular tests to build familiarity and confidence. As well, the math teachers are currently using EQAO formula sheets from grade 7 onwards.
So student wellness and student voice is also incredibly important to us and is obviously very important to me on a personal level as well. CPHS was an early adopter of using the Tell Them For Me survey as a jumping off point for student leadership opportunities and to address student wellness issues. And the school is currently involved in the pilot that the board is running. Previous year's work has included a random acts of kindness week. That's one of the signs that's up there in the middle. That was on the front door of the school when you came in. Really getting challenging students and everyone in the building to think about how we can make other people's days and how we treat others. We've thrown surprise birthday parties for students, run assemblies to share survey results from the Tell Them For Me so that they know that we are listening to them. We created posters that challenged perceptions and misperceptions of mental illness. And we've had students organize day-long courses for other students and staff to take for enjoyment, learning, and possible career exploration. The school has worked hard to build engagement, which we feel is really important to wellness as well, an important correlate, by bringing things like a Genius Hour where students are sort of engaged in self-directed learning. We've invested in technology like 3D printers and scanners and have focused on additional trips and experiences to support classroom learning. The school also has many valuable partnerships in the community, including Open Doors, Lanark Mental Health, Victim Services, Developmental Services, the Royal Ottawa Hospital, CHEO, and the OPP. And to conclude, CPHS is a large, dynamic school with programming and options for a wide range of students. It's been a cornerstone institution of the town since 1922, so it's impossible to go to Carleton Place without meeting someone who has some sort of connection, and there's lots of familiar faces on the walls, as there are in many of our towns throughout Upper Canada. The academics at the school are very strong. We have 140 students at the secondary level who are currently on the honor roll, which means they had averages over 80. We also offer a wide range of programming for our students with special needs, including life skills programming, social groups, and opportunities to do co-op as well. The school has a terrific athletic program. We have a very competitive track program in particular, and always have fun competing with TIS. We also have one of the first CrossFit programs in the country, actually, to be run at the high school level. We have a very strong arts program. The school has, I mentioned before, a great instrumental music program. The drama department is doing very well. They went to the Sears Festival in Kingston last year for the first time and won, much to their surprise and delight. The school's main staircase, the picture in the top left is from that. We engaged with the visual arts department, and we partnered with the local heritage museum and did a virtual sort of artistic timeline of Carleton Place up the main staircase of the school as part of our Canada 150 celebrations in the spring. The school, as I said, also benefits from having international students in the Bear Ambassador program, so that's them at the bottom right. As you can see, eating beaver tails and skating on the canal and making sure they get all those great Canadian experiences. Finally, the school has extensive community contacts and partnerships. One of the projects last year had us pairing with a Toronto charity called Stopgap, and it's up in the middle there. And that was where we were providing accessibility ramps to businesses and services in the town of Carleton Place. And the ramps allow people in wheelchairs, seniors, and parents with strollers to access businesses that they couldn't get into otherwise. And we did that in partnership with the town of Carleton Place, the Business Improvement Association.
I found this on the web for the ramps. Allow people.
Sorry, yeah, that's all right.
That's okay.
Did I miss one? Thank you, Siri. It's like a self-affirmation. You're doing fine, Eric.
Thank you, Siri. Thank you.
You got 12 seconds left. We were building, what were we doing? Oh yeah, that's right, we were building ramps, so it's kind of nice if you come down Bridge Street in Carleton Place, you can actually see these familiar yellow ramps there. So just to conclude, as CPHS closes in on its 100th anniversary, the school has lots to be proud of in its past and a great deal to look forward to in the future. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open it up to comments or questions. I'm going to turn it over to Trustee Cram first, though.
Thank you, Chair. As trustee for the area, I'm very proud of Carleton Place High School. The enthusiasm of the students can certainly be seen by walking down the hallway. Their enthusiasm both for the school and for the staff that has been put together is just second to none and out of this world. All you have to do is walk down that hall and you'll feel it. They also have a relationship that they've developed with the Carleton Place Canadians, both their Junior A and Junior B teams, and the phys ed program and how they interact back and forth. And we can't forget that the feeder schools at Carleton Place also include Beckwith Township is also sending their students to Carleton Place High School, and that whole area we obviously know with the 850 students that we have to start looking at programming at that high school. So very, very proud of Carleton Place High School.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Trustee Bill McPherson.
Thank you, through the chair. Just a couple of questions. I see you mentioned the Bear Ambassadors program. I assume that has something to do with the Carleton Place Golden Bears. I don't know whether you still call your football team that or not. Could you explain what the Bear Ambassadors program is?
Sure, through you, Chair. So the Bear Ambassadors are actually a group of Canadian students who partner with our international students to engage in activities. So as I say, the canal was sort of one example of it, but they'll do things like they'll go apple picking in the fall and then bake apple pies. In the spring, they'll go to the sugar bush, for example. And there's one time last year, actually, I remember saying to Superintendent Mills, it was sort of the ultimate experience, because what they did is they went and skated on the canal, and so there the Canadian students were helping the international students get on their skates and holding hands hands and keeping them from falling over. And then they went to Chinatown for dim sum, which was a first for a lot of the Canadian students. And so it was a great back and forth there, where in each area there was a spot where the students were more comfortable and got to learn something about some of the other cultures.
Okay.
Thank you.
Second question.
Certainly.
Through the chair. You share a fairly close proximity to Elmont District High School. I know in the past they've had some joint ventures. I believe there was a Habitat for Humanity a few years ago that they helped in the construction of. Do you still do semi-official partnerships with that school?
Through you, Chair, we don't have anything sort of official at the moment. It's certainly we work informally, I guess I would say, with Almont, and certainly we collaborate regularly with them. I was speaking with Principal Holman just today, and in fact I'm going to a meeting in Almont next Wednesday, but not at the moment. I know, yes, in the past there's been some shared programming that was built in, but that's not something that we're doing currently. Not that we'd be opposed to it at all, but...
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Trustee John McAllister.
Thank you, Eric, for a good presentation. I know you were a leader last year in the Tell Them For Me pilot project, and the main goal of that was reducing student and staff anxiety. I have a question for you, though. If I were a student at CPHS, would I know how and where to get help with anxiety and depression issues?
Through you, Chair. I would certainly hope so. I mean, it would be difficult for me to speak for them, but certainly it's something that we've worked really hard on. And so part of the work of the pilot that we've been doing, last year under Superintendent Edwards and Dawes, and this year continuing under Superintendent Ferguson and Dawes, is trying to ensure that students know what we're up to, and so you may recall when we spoke about the Tell Them For Me before, we had this sort of we asked, you said, we're doing sort of cycle. And so part of what we've been really trying to do is make sure that we're communicating that clearly to students. So reporting back to them on some of the things they're telling us about, ensuring that they know why we're doing what we're doing, and that's as a result of the data we're getting from them. We've also been working hard to sort of increase our range of communication tools. So for example, one of the things we've done is we've actually installed sort of poster boards in all of the washrooms in the building, and we've used those to have campaigns around things like mental health, putting up the Kids Help Zone number, things like that, where we're helping them to understand where help is available, but also really working hard to tackle some of the misconceptions perhaps about mental illness. And so one of the things our Tell Them For Me group came up with last year was they made posters that had people like Mike Babcock on them and Daniel Alfredson, right, who were talking about mental health, and those went up in the boys' washrooms, right, to talk about that is important to boys as well, and that there's nothing unmanly or whatnot about dealing with mental health issues and that sort of thing. So they've been trying to tackle it, I would say, on a number of different levels. We also have a school support partner who's in with us regularly as well, and the students certainly know her well. And as I say, we have very good relationships with our community partners and work really closely with them to try and ensure that we're getting everyone picked up who needs extra help, for sure.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Director, you want to make a comment?
I would. Mr. Chair, I had the pleasure of visiting the school not so long ago with Superintendent Barrett, and all three gentlemen were present, and that, first of all, spoke a lot about the collaborative nature of talking about student success and student achievement, because it doesn't just rest with the principal. The two vice principals as well carry that responsibility. What I was particularly interested in, and it didn't actually show up in the presentation, might have been referenced, but on slide 5, when there's a discussion about student wellness and student voice, one of the things that the school has done is that they've created a wellness center. And what they've done is actually the same kind of concept that you just heard Principal Hardy speak about just a moment ago about destigmatizing mental health, which was destigmatizing support and care for young people. You couldn't find two more caring professionals who were in that room that day. And it's a combination of classroom and drop-in center and what would be sort of like a resource room. If you put the three together, this is what it would look like. But the types of students who are going there would be the kinds of students who may not go to one or any of those three exclusively. So I thought it was a very clever design. And it also speaks to one of the very basic premise of student achievement, which is if we can keep them, we can teach them. So if we can get kids inside the building every day, our ability to be able to move forward in student success and their diploma program objectives increases dramatically. If we can't get the students inside the school, if there's some reason that they feel that there's not a place for them, then the idea of student success becomes really remote. So I do think that it's important to recognize how the school and the admin team and the staff have thoughtfully destigmatized what we have traditionally done to create places for students to land for care and support, and made it more about wellness versus a deficit. And I think that that's going to go a long way for the students. I still have a lot of questions to ask about how the model came about and how it can be sustained, but I do think they're really onto something that's quite special, and I really do appreciate that.
Thank you. Trustee Bill McPherson.
Just one further question, and I'm not sure whether you can address it or not. Through the chair. You mentioned the population of Carleton Place. I would believe that a decade ago, Carleton Place was only 5,000 people. The growth there has been absolutely phenomenal. I'm just wondering, how are we positioned with the capacity of the school to accommodate further growth? Now, I realize we do have 2 co-terminus boards within Carleton Place, right? That we have the French board, and we also have the English Catholic board.
At the high school, just the English
Yeah,
Catholic,
so,
yeah.
I'm just wondering about the on-the-ground capacity of Carleton Place High School.
Through you, Chair. Yeah, so we're fairly full at the moment. Certainly, we are, I think, theoretically anyway, over capacity as far as the numbers go. Having said that, we are managing fine with the numbers that we're at, and I would suggest that we could probably even accommodate a bit more than we have at the moment. But certainly, I know it's a topic of conversation, and I know it's a matter of concern for Trustee Cram as well about what that looks like going forward. I have read that the anticipation is that the town will reach 15,000 people within probably 5 years or so as these new houses are being built. So certainly there will be some consideration, I think, about capacity moving forward. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any comments from anyone on the telephone lines? Thank you. Any other questions at the table? Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your presentation.
Chair.
Safe travels tonight. And remind us to have a couple chairs along the side, because we have a few of our superintendents are always up and down, and it would be nice if we had chairs for them. We'll get that next time. The next presentation is Pineview Public School, and I'm going to turn this over to Superintendent Ferguson, who's going to introduce Principal Tricia Johnston.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to invite Principal Tricia Johnston to the table to join us. I've traveled to Pineview several times in the last few months. Every time I go there, it's a beautiful sunny day. I'm starting to wonder if it ever rains in Athens. And then when I go inside the school, what I find is, and I've been there for a variety of reasons, but no matter what the reason I'm there, when I go inside, I find a principal who's smiling, who's calm, who's confident, and leading her school. And when we go on a walk, it's not surprising. We then find that with the staff and the students as well. Lots of smiling faces, excited to learn, excited to be there. And I'd like to turn it over now to Principal Tricia Johnston, and she's going to share a little bit more about what goes on inside Pineview.
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Superintendent Ferguson. So Pineview Public School is a bustling rural school surrounded by pine trees and located in Athens, Ontario. Prior to Pineview, students attended Farmersville School, and Farmersville, the town, was renamed to Athens in honor of Athens, Greece, because it was an educational center that had a grammar school, a school for teaching, as well as a high school. Our current enrollment is currently 225 students with over 30 staff members. Our school has junior kindergarten to grade 6, as well as French immersion in the regular program. Our student population draws from a wide range of areas, including Charleston Lake, Temperance Lake, Lake Aloyda, Frankville, Addison, New Dublin, Plum Hollow, Oakleaf, and Soperton, as well as Athens. At Pineview, we have 13 classrooms and an outdoor learning environment. We have a sensory room, a music room, and a learning commons, and each of our classrooms are equipped with smartboard technology, including laptops and iPads to complement our 21st century learners. At Pineview, we interact with a variety of community groups on a daily basis, and we feel well supported within our community, and we feel like we work together to help each other. Moving to our next slide, which shows our EQAO data. And the clear trend, of course, is in the area of math, and that the scores are below the provincial board and province's average. The good news with this is that over the last 3 years, our EQAO data are showing a sharp incline in math from 8% to 12% to 32% this past year. I believe one of the most significant pieces of data that we can take from this is the considerable difference between our junior math and our junior literacy scores. If we as a staff were questioning the overall aptitude or particular needs of a certain cohort, I think this data really challenges that conjecture. And as a staff, we've had some really great discussions about our junior math scores. And the one thing that was apparent was that this data encourages us to delve deeper into our math teaching and our math learning in order to improve instructions with our students in all levels. In aligning with our Ontario's renewed math strategy, we began to make changes in the way that we look at delivering math instruction at our school. All classes now have math with their homeroom teacher. The school has moved away from the JUMP math program and moved toward exploring math using a variety of resources. Every class has a 1-hour math block, and our LRT supports some small group instruction. The renewed portion of the RMS strategy mentality has really been key in allowing our staff to think about different opportunities, to give us different opportunities to think about math and how we teach it. And we know that if we continue to teach math in the same ways, that we'll continue to get the same results. So our SIPSA plan will be important in continuing the incline in these results, not only in math, but in literacy as well. Our SIPSA goal for literacy is that by the end of June, 75% of our students in grade 3 and 6 will meet or exceed the provincial standard in reading, and that 75% of our students at all grade levels will be reading at grade level using an in-school reading diagnostic. We also chose the reading diagnostic as that data could be measured more frequently and can quickly show us improvements or areas of little or no growth. For literacy, we really wanted to connect our work to the 90% graduation rate in order to create a little bit more urgency on our elementary site. And so we've taken, as you can see, the data on the slide shows our current state with regard to reading levels. We feel that's creating a little bit more urgency. Based on our school and EQAO data, we're currently exploring inferencing and the student's ability to be able to synthesize information in reading. Our cycle of inquiry includes identifying a learning problem, our observations, intentional teacher moves, a learning task, and then reflecting and documenting about how our cycle has impacted student learning. Our current work includes professional reading and the Wheel of Strategic Actions as it relates to reading. In our work right now, we've identified strategies or intentional teacher moves, and our next steps will be to complete a moderated assessment with a post-cycle task with each group to see what our impacts on student learning have been. Moving on to math. Our goal for math is that 75% of our students in grade 3 and grade 6 will meet or exceed the provincial standard in math. And our theory of action is that if we as educators understand the math continuum for numeracy development, and we understand where each of our students is at on the continuum, that we can incorporate strategies within our classrooms to move them along the continuum. Through the exploration of our data, we found that students in both grades 3 and 6 are becoming increasingly efficient in questions around knowledge and understanding. But still difficult for our students is being able to think critically about a math problem in order to solve it efficiently. Through our work, we're finding that part of the issue is that old strategies that fall earlier within the math continuum for numeracy development are not as efficient in solving math equations with more complexity. So the older our students are getting and into the junior grades, some of them are still using the more primary strategies, and they're relying on them, and they're not making much of a difference as they encounter larger numbers with more complex structures. We're currently reading the book What to Look For by Alex Lawson, which describes the continuum in detail, but also provides us with some strategies that will allow students to move along the continuum. Our plan is that by identifying exactly where the students in our building are at within the continuum, we'll be able to teach them strategies to get to the next spot in the continuum. Our intentional teacher moves will be to review misconceptions and displaying work showing multiple strategies. One of our teachers is going to be explicitly practicing visualization techniques with her students, and most of our teachers are regularly modeling their own thinking as students solve problems. Reflecting upon our first cycle, we know that more work around moving kids along the continuum is needed. Our learning partner is helping to plot all of our students on the continuum right now. And at our next meeting, we'll be looking at what the strategies we'll be using in each class, depending on what the data shows us. We feel that we've pinpointed a measure that will help fill some glaring gaps in math learning, and we're confident that this work is making a difference. Moving on to student wellness. Student wellness is a top priority at Pineview, and we have a number of key pieces in our student-driven work plan to address student wellness and student voice at our school. We partner with many different agencies and work together to ensure that our students are as healthy as they can be. At Pineview, we offer the Ontario Learning Years program for babies and children aged 0 to 6. And this program, being at our school, allows us to make lots of connections with our incoming families. We're excited to have many community partnerships with a variety of groups, including the Impact Zone, Athens Kids Club, Athens Public Library and Museum, Athens Minor Soccer, softball, skating, and hockey, our local Lions Club, and the many Athens businesses who support us in so many ways. In October, we distributed a 25-question survey around bullying, around wellness and attitudes towards school to all of our students in grades 1 to 6. And in it, we included a question asking students to identify an adult in the building that they would be comfortable approaching if they had a problem. 100% of students were able to identify at least one adult in the building that they would be able to talk to if they had a problem. Through the surveys, one piece of data stood out to us, and that was that 26% of our students, or about a quarter, are reporting that they're being bullied often. So we responded to that survey in a number of ways. We included more staff members on the yard. We now have 9 to 10 adults on the yards at recess. We reviewed our WIT strategies with all classes, and as many of the responses came from our primary grades, we now have grade 6 helpers, peer helpers on the yard for our last recess. The I Belong initiative is apparent in our everyday situations when we deal with students. The rule at our school is that everyone belongs and that everyone is is welcome, whether it's in play or in learning. Students often have a say in their own learning, whether it be how to learn a particular concept or how they will celebrate a particular event. We've recently expanded our Panthers of the Week program to allow students to be able to recognize other students. Previous to that, it was teachers or staff recognizing students. And our reason for doing that is that we think that if students are more aware of behavior of others, perhaps they'll be more aware of their own behavior. And lastly, we've recently begun to grow our own food at Pineview, and we're noticing that students are taking great interest in the tasting and the planning of the gardens. We're also noticing that this initiative is creating much excitement and reaching some of our hard-to-reach students and creating a sense of fun and belonging. So I've chosen this photo as the last slide. It's the kindergarten class in 1980 at Pineview, and I've chosen it for a number of reasons. So the child in the front with the lovely brown vest is me. I'm now the principal at Pineview. The teacher on the right, Mrs. Johnston, she taught at Pineview for 25 years, and she is my mother. My husband is a graduate of Pineview, also taught by my mother. My own 2 children are currently at Pineview in grades 1 and 4. And I share this not as a personal story, but to help you understand the rural culture and connectedness that this school is built upon. You see, if you look at that photo, you may also see Mrs. Boyer, who's now our school learning partner. You'll also see a number of other students who have worked at Pineview over the past few years. You might note that for the past 5 years, the previous principal of ADHS, Marcia McNair, is a graduate of Pineview with many links to the community. You'll also see that about half of these students in this photo currently have their own children at Pineview. Beyond that, you'll also see some community businessmen and community businesswomen within the picture who now have strong connections to our school. And though I've chosen this photo as I know its stories well, I could have chosen virtually any photo of any class at Pineview, and I guarantee it would have told a very similar story. So this small example shows how in this rural space, our parents, our students, our community, we're all interconnected, and we use these connectedness, these relationships to maximize the potential in each and every one of the students that come into our doors, both those new to the community and those who've been around here for generations. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to open it up to comments and questions, but it would only be right to turn it over to Trustee John McAllister, who happens to be your trustee.
Thank you, Trish, for your presentation. It's pretty obvious that Pineview Public School is a very integral part of the Athens community at large. And I'm particularly proud of the holistic approach to all aspects of learning that you are undertaking to change. And I know that change is gradual, but it's still it's very obvious. I guess the one question I'd like to ask you, Trish, what links do you have to the high school?
Through you, Chair. So we work closely with the staff over at over at ADHS, and we're looking to coordinate some math learning in conjunction with the high school. So their staff would come over and spend a little bit of time in our math classrooms, and we would go the other way as well. We also have lots of transition activities. So the high school will invite our school over for Music Monday, and generally the focus is on our grade 5 and 6 students, but sometimes our whole school is involved and sometimes they will come to us. So last year, as an example, that initiative changed from Music Mondays, us going over there, to them coming over to our school, and we involved students from JK all the way to grade 6. And there's some joint activities that we often will advertise together and try to bring, we do a mind, body, and soul activity with our parent councils where it's a parent-student workshop night. We do that in conjunction with Meadowview as well. So we have all 3 schools that come together.
Great. Just one comment, Chair. I'm really pleased to see that you've recovered from your debilitating fall on the track.
Through you, Chair. I don't recall the fall. But I know what you're getting at.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Trustee Bill McPherson.
Thank you. I've driven by your school several times on snowmobile heading to the office.
Yes, there are snowmobile trails
just
behind
a question about your library. A former colleague of ours at this table used to be your trustee, Bob Hartley, and I was just wondering if the library is still named after him.
Through you, Chair, yes, Bob Hartley's photo is still prominently displayed in the library, and it's his namesake. So his 2 grandchildren are actually at our school now, Daniela and Evie Hartley.
Thank you. Any other? Trustee Swan?
I just want to thank you for your presentation. Both my children went to Pineview, and I was very happy with them there. They were very happy being there. And the one thing you didn't touch on that I think was something that really impacted my daughter was the exceptional French instruction you have there, which was the reason we switched from Meadowview to Pineview. And she's in grade 11 now and still is quite fluent to the extent that she passed the federal government French test a couple of years back. So I phoned all her French teachers to thank her, but can you just expand more on do you still have the extended French?
Through you, Chair. So we do have French immersion, and our students who are choosing French immersion are there for half the day, and that starts in junior kindergarten all the way up. And generally it's exactly a half day of English, half day of French, and as they move on to grade 7, they they have the option over at Athens District High School to continue an immersion over there, and all the way through to where they can graduate with a certificate.
Thank you.
Director.
Mr. Chair, through you, last spring, Superintendent Coombs and I visited Pineview Public School, and Ms. Johnson took us through the entire school. We spent a good amount of time in the early primary area, and I thought that was what was really deserves high praise, is that very early on in our district we introduced the revised kindergarten curriculum program, and it was front and center at that school not long after we saw it roll out from the province. One of the most important of the 4 pillars is about belonging and contributing. And it was so apparent to us in our time in the kindergarten program that it could easily see how we were trying to set up young people for a really great life and success as learners. I do think that we need to make sure that we acknowledge and laud the fact that there's a lot of things that are happening as part of learning in schools. One of them is to make sure that it stays and remains current. And here's a country school that has a very robust population. Easy to say that we'll get to it, and it was right on their front and center, up on the bulletin boards. It happened to be the immersion French class as well, and the level of engagement, both in terms of belonging and contributing, but also in math and literacy behaviors, which is another one of the pillars. I thought that it spoke a lot about how both the principal and the school staff recognize that they want students, regardless of where they come, from what school, to be up and current on what should be the most recent learning. So there's something there that really was laudable that day. I have no doubt that it's continued. I look forward to the next time I get a chance to visit there with Superintendent Ferguson now. But I certainly think that the community has a lot to be proud of, and not only the local people that are taking care of the local children there, but just the fact that it's current and it's up to date in terms of what we would expect to be seeing in all of our schools.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? Seeing there are none, thank you very much. Safe travels tonight.
Brown best. On the, yeah.
Okay, moving on to the next item. These are action items. The first, actually the next 3 belong to the director. The first is the Director's Award of Merit, Fall 2017. I'm going to turn this over to Director Sliwa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, trustees will recall that the origin of the Award of Merit came actually from the Ipso-Reid survey that the board commissioned in 2014-15, where the feedback that stakeholders had provided was that our staff felt that there was still more room to give recognition and credit to the work that they do, and how do we identify that formally. So through the direction of the board, staff did look at what our options were, and we instituted this award last spring for the first time. We had a very robust response then, and we did again this time around. Trustees will see that we had 37 nominations from a wide range of staff, and it's while our teacher staff is the largest complement of employees that we have, it also supports staff and administration. So it's really quite an impressive list, and it's my certain pleasure to identify to you tonight who our winners are, and it was not an easy discussion because the recommendations and nominations that came forward all were very glowing. We should feel very proud by the way that we have so many good people that are taking care of our students, and that they come in all kinds of roles and responsibilities as well. The senior team discussed the short list of candidates who met the criteria, and the award winners are: we have Nancy Clow, who's our Learning Commons informationalist at Gananoque Intermediate Secondary School, and Kathleen Ginak, I hope I said that correctly, from TR Leger in Cornwall, who's one of the counselors there, and whose nominator had spoke with such high regard about some of the most difficult cases that Kathleen deals with. She does that with compassion and care, and it really does get some very special results for us for students that have often lost their way through the regular school system. We also have Paula Mooney, who's a teacher at Meadowview Public School, and we congratulate her, and the nominator again was very, very effusive with praise, with lots of evidence that suggests that Paula is making a difference at the school where she works. Susan Steele, who's an education assistant at Pakenham Public School, and Susan has been credited by her nominator as making a significant difference at the school and making a difference in the lives of children who's there. Gordon Zubik, who's a teacher at Russell High School, and if you follow Gordon at all in terms of Twitter, you'll see that he's very, very strong on well-being and well-being portfolio and making sure that students remain healthy and active. And also Superintendent Val Allen, who was nominated as a person who really was making a difference. It's hard to keep that secret from you, Val. But was making a difference in how we are leading the work in a variety of instructional areas and setting a model for all of us. So we're very pleased and proud of all of our nominees, and I hope that you would join me in giving them a round of applause this evening.
Superintendent Allen, did they send you on a coffee run or something? Did you not start to you feel a little paranoid after a while, like we need coffee? I'll go get us some. Congratulations to everyone. Thank you, Director. The next item is the Director of Education's work plan and status report.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, through you, it's my pleasure to bring this item to the attention of the Board of Trustees. You may recall that staff came forward at the board meeting of 27 September with what was at that time our response, our work plan, in light of the board's priorities that they had set around the crew charter for sure, and around collaboration, resources, educational programming, and well-being. As a matter of fact, and I'll ask if we can go to our first slide, what we did present to you that evening was in effect the key initiatives that will advance the board's strategic priorities. That is about 90% graduation, and it's about making sure that that our staff feel that we are communicating well with them and agree that there is valued and clear communication, that we're investing in student climates in the way that our students feel that there is a climate of care and rigorous attention to them and to their needs, because we heard through the Ipso-Reid survey that students were experiencing stress in school, and that meant that we needed to ask more questions about how we engage students and support them, especially when they come forward and disclose to us that they are having some challenges while studying and being under our care. And then lastly, Mr. Chair, there was the goal around community partnerships and community collaborations, that there was expressed interest by the board last spring about how could they connect further with the interests of the larger community that Upper Canada serves. When you think about the size of our board, it's quite diverse, and we have everything from a couple of cities to very rural and remote communities as well. And so trying to work more closely with people who are identifying opportunities for that collaboration that will make a difference to our schools. In the next slide, the bottom line for us is how do we go from the boardroom to the staff room and to the classroom, and that was the intention of the work plan that we have. There are two documents that's attached to the report tonight. The first document is one that the board had seen on September 27th, which is essentially the ways and means that we intend to address the initiatives and priorities that we have, and that those initiatives and priorities, we believe, that are a combination of outcomes and outputs that, when fully addressed, will make a difference in the graduation rate, will make a difference in how our employees see their work, will make a difference in terms of how students feel under our care, and will make a difference in terms of our efforts to connect further with the community based on their overtures to the board last spring. So the next slide, if I can take you to that one, is really reflective of the second document that is attached to tonight's report. And it speaks to where are we activating the work through the different types of thresholds we have. Some of the timelines are early, as in 1 to 3 months. Some 3 to 6 months that will be seeing the action initiated and implemented, 6 to 9 months, and then again 9 to 12 months. Those are the larger pieces that will take some time to both lay groundwork, develop tools for data collection, to confirm a monitoring strategy, and then to feedback and adjust on how those larger pieces are here. So I'd like to assure the board that while the first report out is rather modest, the sole reason for that is this is reflective after 6 weeks of activating the plan since it was brought to your attention at the end of September. And I do think that it's important that we can identify to you as a staff how the initiatives that we outline, how we're moving ahead. So an example would be for goal number 1. Goal number 1 had the following 3 outputs that we believe that when addressed will make a difference in terms of how we are leveraging the 2% increase in the graduation rate for this coming June. And you may recall the first priority was to develop and distribute data. That was one of our outputs in a way that could be used quite quickly and actively by our school staff. Another output was making sure that our administrators were acquainted with what were the tools and rules as it relates to engaging students in their learning and as they accumulate credits in different ways that credit recognition exists under those policies provincially, and to ensure that in fact that we are doing that with consistency and with a clear view to some sort of criteria that confirms the credibility of how people are addressing that opportunity at the 21 different secondary schools we have, as well as our TR Leger centers. And the last output in goal number 1 was to establish and implement family of schools discussions about credit accumulation. And that is to say, when we meet together as a larger group, do we have the opportunity to actually identify blind spots that the local family of schools team may not have seen as part of their dialogue, and offer suggestions and resources that could make a difference in terms of that student achieving credit outcomes for that semester or for that school year. We'll go to the next slide. The next slide is a summary of one of the pages in the status update, which as we move along will become more robust and more detailed. After 6 weeks, what we can tell you about goal number 1 is that in terms of finances, we do have a figure that we're working with that we believe that the commitment would be in excess of $100,000 of what we're planning to do to address, because as you know, in Action 2, in goal number 1, there is a human resource strategy attached to that, and depending on where we see the needs, we would be dispensing those resources to support student learning. So right now we're under target. We haven't exceeded the target, nor have we hit the target because of the early implementation stage that we're at. That also speaks to the second graphic that's on that slide, which says that action's required because apart from Action 3, that's already been implemented, and Superintendent Coombs, who's carrying that as one of the project champions, has already, I think, reached out to secondary schools by memo and to remind them that we are trying to make sure that this data pool that we have is active and up to date, including midterm data. So with the exception of that one action item that we were able to do as an essential piece of groundwork, that in the absence of that data, it's hard to have conversations that are going to be comprehensive. So the remaining 4 other actions are pending and will need to be actioned within the timelines that are noted. We may also be in a position at our next report out in February to identify the groundwork and any new costs that have accumulated and to advise the board about our still being on target, or if in fact we're still under target in terms of costs and using those resources. I want to speak as well to the board about goal number 2, because that did matter in the Ipso-Reid survey, which was how were we connecting with our employees, valuing their input, ensuring that they were part of the dialogue so that things that came from the boardroom as it relates to the board's strategic initiatives and goals were understood, and that people could make a personal connection, our staff, to what did that really mean. Now, I've already had a chance earlier on to speak to to Vice Chair McDonald not so long ago, because after our meeting, we was following a meeting that we had in a collaborative session at one of the schools in his zone. And our idea here is that if people are part of the thinking, they can be part of the explanation. If we agree with that kind of premise, then the idea is to have a variety of staff as part of the discussion about crew, about the board's strategic direction, about the director's work plan, and ask what does it mean to make a personal connection. So in that example, we are hosting roundtable discussions. We've met with over 100 people as of today at those roundtable discussions, and they include principals, vice principals, teachers, EAs, ECEs, office administrators. The only people that we haven't yet had join us at the session yet is our custodian teams, and as part of that is because it's very, very hard to find a way of backfilling those roles during the operational day. But we do hope that if they're not able to join us this round, that we make more vigorous attempts to ensure that they are joining us in round number 2. If we can scroll down as an example of where we are in this particular goal reporting out in report number 1 is that, again, we are under target in terms of cost because these are still early days, and after 6 weeks, very early days in terms of the implementation. But we do have some evidence of quick wins, and what I would like to point to particularly is action 1 and action 2. And in the next slide is just a couple of quick photographs where we're focusing on staff who agree that they feel valued and that there's good communication. This was a quick snapshot of a small group from the 40 people that joined us at Carleton Place last week for this dialogue. And for many of them, it was a quick refresher about crew. One of the pieces of feedback that we had is that they were of a view that crew, as both a concept and as a strategic direction, had been closed off and finalized. What we were wanting to remind people was that the critical success factors that makes up crew, C, R, E, and W, is actually essential to all kinds of things that we desire for students, whether it is in well-being or in terms of student achievement. And just to give you an idea about where folks are connecting the dot, in the next slide, we have one example of what's there. And what people are speaking to us about is how they see what crew is, how they'll make a personal connection, leaving that meeting and taking it to schools, how they're going to make a personal connection and asking students about how do you collaborate, what resources do you use in order to achieve the things that you desire to do, what is a good educational program to you, how do you keep well. So what we heard just out of that one recent session was taking the kinds of levers that the board's identified as essential for achieving its strategic directions and seeing that our own staff can make personal connections in their own work and beyond their daily work, seeing as a way of starting up conversations with students. I do think, trustees, that is one of the really key things that we're looking for as a way of confirming that in fact what we desire and what we want really out of this is that folks feel a strong connection and a strong affinity to what we're doing as a system, that they see themselves as advocates for what the board believes is valuable as part of student learning and student achievement, and they understand how we're trying to do that. Two last goals to bring to your attention as an update. Goal number 3, which is about really about student environment or student climate and how we increase our students' ability to deal with stress. So we want really for our children, by the time they graduate from school, 4 basic things. We want them to be smart, we want them to be good, we want them to be kind, and we want them to be resilient. That we need to make sure that over the 14 years that they're with us, 2 years in kindergarten plus grade 1 to grade 12, that we give students plenty of practice and guidance and support for what does it mean to deal with life within the school, and to see whether or not we can help them to be more prepared to deal with the unexpected and the disappointments that are part of living a full life. We have priorities and initiatives, as you know, with this goal as well from the work plan that speaks to a number of outputs as well. The biggest one, and you've heard this from the senior staff before, is really landing on a ministry document called Supporting Minds that came out, I believe, in 2013. And that document is really a guideline and a focus for guidance for how adults speak to students who are having difficulties with wellness and self-care. And so we've been spending a great deal of time bringing our adults on board in all of our different schools to become familiar with that resource, to practice what does it mean to use it in action. And then the next step is to start building what are some options and opportunities to help staff engage in that level 1. You know, we have 3 tiers of support, and level 1 is about proactive measures that we're trying to build student capacity to respond and to adjust and to manage for part of what does it mean to be a young person in the world today and a young person attending our schools. The other outputs are about how do we bring school teams to start planning specifically around elements around wellness. And when we think about wellness, it's not only about stress, it's about eating well. It's about developing a positive self-regard for who you are and where you come from and an appreciation for that. It's about exercise. As one of the participants today at the roundtable discussions indicated to us, what they found very difficult is that students who don't eat and then decide to take energy drinks through mid-course during the day are actually putting themselves in a very difficult spot, both physically and emotionally, because while they may be stimulated, they are not focused. And when they're not focused, then there are problems that comes out in our human relationships. So I just thought it was quite interesting to see that our staff themselves have a very wide definition about student well-being that we think often as adults and as parents and as grandparents, that it's really about making sure that people are emotionally safe and secure, when really there's a larger network built around that about how you interact with others, who you interact with, how you take care of yourself in terms of exercise and diet, and what does it also mean to make these things your priorities as opposed to being things that are done on the periphery. And lastly, there's a need for us as part of the deliverables and the priorities and initiatives that we believe will make a difference in how students deal with stress, is to ask, how do we do school? We hear feedback from the Tell Them For Me survey that possibly in some of the schools that we actually are creating that stressful experience, and that if we make some tweaks or adjustments, that it could make a difference on how students feel about going to school every day. That could be everything for a secondary school student that has multiple deadlines on the same day, to starting to build some sort of capacity with students about what does it mean to prepare for a large summative experience like an exam, and how does it how do you recognize that it isn't actually about cramming and preparing over 72 hours in advance of that event. It's about investing in your learning all the way through your semester experience and coming prepared to talk about what you know, do, and understand. It also means for our staff confirming that we're giving students a variety of opportunities to show what you know, do, and understand, because the Growing Success Provincial Assessment and Evaluation Guidelines talks about demonstrating your capacity, your knowledge, through conversations, observations, and products. And with a few exceptions of certain disciplines, like the arts and like modern languages, most of our, and the technical areas as well, I should say technical education, most of our areas spend time on proving what you know, do, and understand through products, not through conversation and not through observation. And if we recognize that students show what they know in different ways, and we all have different strengths, it could be that we'll have students who are feeling less stress or less reluctance about attending school when it comes to key moments about evaluation, when they know that there are options and choices in which they can demonstrate what they've learned over the course of a particular unit of study. The last one, Mr. Chair, and goal number 4 is about connecting with the community and community stakeholders. So the board received towards the spring and early summer a number of requests from municipalities, for instance, to partner with them in activities and events that they thought was going to be good for the school and good for their community. We know that the community also appreciates us being present where they're present, so that we can talk about the things that we do in our schools and with students. And examples of that, the board has already heard about being present in fairs and community events to talk to people about Upper Canada and what Upper Canadians do on behalf of students. All of those actions right now are pending. The cost center for the dollars that we have are under target as well, because we haven't actioned that, and largely because we're doing some essential groundwork and have to engage in some essential conversations in the next 6 to 12 months to build the kinds of dialogues that we want that are sustainable and that will outlive this particular part of the plan. So with that in mind, Mr. Chair, I turn it back over to you. I just want to confirm that the next steps for us as a team, in order to enact what the board has as their strategic directions, is that we're going to be both in a clarifying and a finalizing type of stage. Clarifying is about confirming some of the performance measures and the data collection tools that we have and need to have in place in order to report back some of the key elements that we believe is proof that we're moving forward, and also finalizing ourselves as a team about reporting structures and meeting timelines, because this is actually new work for us as a full group. What has happened in the past through the previous crew model is that it was tasked to a few people, and then not necessarily a whole team dialogue and a whole team investment. So I do think that we're also trying to reculture the way that the senior team works and delivers on the direction of the board in ways that we can speak to it authentically and together as a group. So thank you for the opportunity to bring that forward, and we'll see if there's any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to open the floor to comments or questions. Seeing there are none, we'll move on to the next item, which is the Director's Quarterly Report.
Thank you again, Mr. Chair. And
getting tired of talking yet?
Yeah, well, it's very rare that it's all about Steve. It's certainly not the way at home, so I'm glad that I have the opportunity to do that at work. So hopefully no one at home is watching this evening, but they'll realize what just happened there. So, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to present to you the quarterly report, and I look forward to your feedback on this for sure. It's my pleasure to present to you what has been the basic activity that's defined my work over the last 3 months. You know, I've said this before, and I'll say it again, that I'm very fortunate that the board has as part of my hire, has indicated that they want me to be in schools, they want me to be linked to instruction, and they want me to promote what we're doing at schools and what is valuable, what we're doing in instruction as part of my core work. So with regards to the board's policy 101 or 1001, what you ask of me each quarter is to report back on what are the top 3 achievements from the last 3 months, what's the top 3 challenges, and what's the top 3 priorities. So our top 3 achievements, I do want to say that culturing and building a capacity around our director's work plan has been some of the toughest work that we've had to do as a team, because it required sustained focus, a lot of goodwill, a lot of good listening, and then to be able to deliver that and now to really do the work that we've committed to do. Onboarding our new superintendents has been a priority for us, because we know that a lot is expected of them, both in the community level and by this table. And so we're very fortunate to have our new colleagues that are doing the work that we're doing, and we want to make sure that they feel confidence and the support about what will get them on their way in a positive and productive way. We are also refreshing our focus on equity, inclusion, and well-being. The board has been a leader in those areas for quite some time. And what's really important is to revisit what was the key pieces that in fact caused the board to have a great deal of pride. And is it possible that over the last short while we may have been resting on our laurels, and it's time to revisit, refresh, and then recommit to the things that we think is really valuable in those two particular portfolios. And we are on our way in both those areas, and the board can expect to hear back from staff about what that looks like and sounds like in the near future. The top 3 challenges as we move ahead, I don't want to eclipse the audit committee report that Vice Chair McDonald will be bringing forward in a moment, but we do have an obligation when things come from audit committee to respond and to address whatever those priorities are. So we have to make sure that that is clear about what those actions might be, and that we've provided adequate space for any kind of follow-up that's required. Focusing on performance management is something that we need to make sure that we not only make time for, but we build capacities in our system. And that means that we are giving feedback to all employees at all levels, so that they know how are we doing in our respective work, and are we hitting the mark, especially when it's years when it's a planning year and not an evaluation year, and some employees have that as part of their performance management experience. One of the things that we want to capitalize, and Superintendent Coombs is going to be instrumental in this as well as part of our board's leadership development strategy, is about coaching. So coaching is ensuring that we're building the capacities early on with people who are skilled as mentors or as coaches, so that we are not waiting till people are in either difficulty or in a state of uncertainty, but instead that we are acting and building capacity so they can be confident in doing their work and improving in their work. And that's at all levels. And that comes from the provincial government, where previously I think we could say with some confidence that they saw coaching as being part of administrative work exclusively. But coaching is actually something that we do at the curriculum and special education side of our work, and that's why we have learning partners and learning support partners. And it's also something that all tiers of employees would benefit from, and we're exploring what that might mean. Why it's a challenge is how do we do it in a way that is credible, collaborative, and makes a difference, versus something that's just offered to people and let's see how that takes off. Lastly, one of the last challenges is about following up on any remaining commitments about the pupil accommodation review. As you know, there were several different components about that: program components, school consolidation components, school capital components. That includes working with the Ministry of Education about where we might stand in terms of dollars that are available. My top 3 priorities for the next quarter is to make sure that in Q2 that our work plan is very much activated, authentic, and part of our daily work. It's interesting, some feedback that I've heard recently is that from our superintendents, they're talking about the work plan in their field work that they do, because I heard from principals today that superintendents are making direct references to a certain goal and a certain action. And it causes us then to start saying, well, it's happening, something's happening, what does that mean? And that's where these roundtable discussions are quite critical. And lastly, school visits to promote our district-wide priorities around numeracy and literacy. You heard from our school presentations this evening from our 2 principals that there's a real need to make sure that we are continuing to invest in the trajectory that we want in terms of seeing students from grade 3 and onwards having a positive trajectory in terms of literacy and numeracy. And I hope that some of the anecdotal comments at the end of the report, where there's a few snapshots there, shows you the intentions, which is if we hold the goals that we have for students steady, if we describe and build together that description about what does good work look like, then there's a really solid chance that students are going to hit the mark each and every time. That means not just with this particular learning focus, but how do we refresh that and do that again? And how do we make sure that we're using student-friendly language so that students know what exactly is that criteria versus using the educator's language that comes sometimes from very technical documents like the curriculum itself. The 2 examples I have up there is, one example is from, on the left-hand side, is from a primary classroom, and the right-hand side is from a grade 8 classroom. 2 very different schools. And when we go on learning walks, when we go on school visits together with superintendents, we look for evidence of that. And I invite you as well to do the same. When you are visiting schools, look what's up on the walls that students have created together with the teacher, and see what is it that they're focusing on that's so important. And do you see that day on the desk? Do you see that day in what students are talking about? Because to me, that's what we're really trying to aim for, which is a very strong harmonization between what we wanted to do, what's happening, and what we're giving feedback about. And then lastly, Mr. Chair, I wanted to indicate that we do work on minds, and we work on morals as well. That's always been a big part of what education is about in Ontario and certainly in Upper Canada. So we've had a number of different kinds of events and activities that are really asking for kids to dig into what does it mean to be a good person, and what does it mean to be respectful, and what does it mean to recognize that many people in the community have done things for them, and we need to be recognizing and acknowledging their contribution and sometimes their sacrifice. So we do that in a very strong way here, as you heard from Ms. Johnson about Pineview School. Part of that is because it's inescapable when the people that you're working with are your neighbors, your relatives, and your friends. But there's another reason for that as well. It's because, when you come from a place of appreciation each day and start with a grateful heart, you're going to have a good day. And we're trying to build that in our kids. And I think that we're seeing very conscious efforts of that happening all across the district. So I'm pleased to give you that report, Mr. Chair, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there's any.
Thank you. I'll open the floor to comments or questions. Seeing there are none, I'm going to give you a break.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm going to give us a break. We're going to move on to the next item, which is the Audit Committee Annual Report to the Board of Trustees, which will be forwarded to the Ministry of Education. I'm going to open it up by putting the motion on the floor, and then I'm going to turn it over to Trustee David McDonald and Superintendent Nancy Barclay. But I have a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board adopt the 2016-17 Audit Committee Annual Report to the Board of Trustees for the fiscal year August 31st, 2017. Do I have a mover? Trustee McDonald, moved by Trustee McPherson. And I'm going to now turn it over. Okay.
Thank you. Be very brief, Mr. Chair. According to Regulation 361 of 2010, the Audit Committee is required to provide an annual summarized report to the Board and subsequently to the ministry. The report before you gives you a high-level overview of the audits that were conducted during the fiscal year of 2016-17. Those include internal and external audits associated to the work that we do. Actually, this is primarily around the internal audit function, the regional internal audit team. This work is highlighted during our audit committee meetings. As you heard the director talk earlier, oftentimes the findings require management response and management actions, and the audit committee reviews that information on a regular basis. The important thing for us to note is that we don't anticipate any enrollment audits coming forward. Those sometimes create some anxiety. If we are off on our count of students, it requires or it has an impact on the revenue that we receive. So all in all, it was a busy year from an audit committee perspective, and all of the findings were positive, and any work that was required was completed in coordination and collaboration with management and in the regional internal audit team.
Thank you for that. Do I have any comments or questions before I take the vote? Seeing there are, I have a motion that the moved by Trustee McDonald, seconded by Trustee Bill McPherson, that the Upper Canada District School Board adopt the 2016-17 Audit Committee Annual Report to the Board of Trustees for the fiscal year ending August 31st, 2017. I'll ask you to cast your votes, please.
I'm in favor.
Thank you. Trustee
I'm in favor of it.
Thank you. Trustee Karkner?
Yours come up? There it is.
Okay, thank you. That carries. I'm going to turn it over to the next item is the report of the Special Education Advisory Committee. And I'm going to turn this over to that chair with Trustee Bill McPherson.
Thank you. Unlike the director, my wife is watching this movie. She bounces back and forth between the basketball game and the board meeting.
Let's hope this is winning right now.
The CIAC committee met on the 7th of November. The first presentation was by Jillian Jackson from Kids Inclusive in Kingston. She's been a member of the Special Needs Strategy Team for the past 3 years, and she was accompanied by Alison Inglis, the board's chief psychologist. She talked about the mission to provide coordinated service planning in at least the eastern part of our board, and I believe there's a simultaneous process happening in the other side of the board. It's the idea is to provide consistency across the province when families move from one area to another, so you get the same levels of support. CIAC did have some concerns over the future of what was referred to as shared electronic records. The next thing we had was a update on the mental health program by Superintendent Allen. The mental health assist program, the direct district model of support, and the next step is to receive feedback from the board's Living Well committee. A more detailed plan will be brought to a later meeting. Then Superintendent Allen, CIAC meetings, basically it's similar to board. The superintendent does most of the talking. We did talk about the supporting minds, and there was training for the documents provided for the schools in October. And then the committee had a bit of a kick at how we're going to approve the spec ed plan this year. There's a couple of different approaches. The one we have decided upon this year is to look for changes. Places where changes come through, we will approve those as they come through. Lots of times it's just correcting grammar or changing a number here or there. And we also were given the option of taking the CIAC plan in the form of electronic document or a 27-pound binder. Most of them took the jump drive. And then we had the superintendent's report, again, Superintendent Allen. 42 full-time equivalent EAs were added across the system in October. The new IEP system is up and running. SEAC equipment is now incorporated into the IEP. And there was, I mentioned that teachers will be talking to students when old enough about their ITP so they understand what it's about. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is my report.
Thank you, Trustee McPherson. Any comments or questions? Seeing there are none, then we'll move on to the next item, which is the report of the Ontario Public School Boards Association. I'll turn this over to our Director, David McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, I gave you a report at our last meeting about the work that was done at our regional meeting. The only updates I have for you is that there was a link sent out to you, I believe, today about our public education symposium running in January 25th to the 26th to the 29th, 25th to the 27th. Yeah, I'm getting there. Like to round things, just get close. You get there early, you're on time. If you get there late, you miss something. So if you're interested in going, make sure you let Lisa know so that we can get rooms booked. There is going to be a session, the pre-symposium on the Thursday, that will highlight some individual boards, and there was a call out for trustees if they were interested in participating in that. You never know who's going to be there. I mean, they always put invitations out, but we'll see how things transpire between now and January. And knowing that there's an election in the spring, early summer, we may have some individuals that show up to that session. The other thing I wanted to touch up on, Mr. Chair, was around some of the other work that was happening with OPSPA and legislation. And I can't find the link right now, but there was an announcement in the last week or so around curriculum and the changes around Indigenous education. So obviously, I think we've talked about some of the things here, as opposed to making it special projects, things that are happening in addition to. There's significant work that's happening to make sure that some of the stuff is embedded in the things that we do on a daily basis, to recognize what's been highlighted over the work as a result of the work of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I believe that is it, Mr. Chair. We have a Board of Directors meeting coming up on the 1st and 2nd of December, and I'm sure I'll have some more information to share with you at the upcoming board meeting.
Thank you. Do I have any comments or questions on that? Okay, seeing there are none, the next on our list is a motion to amend a previous action. And this is an item that was added just recently. I'm going to read the motion out and begin the discussion. This is a motion moved by Trustee Alicia Swan, seconded by Trustee John McAllister, that the Upper Canada District School Board amend the main motion adopted at the March 23rd, 2017 special meeting, and that the recommendations as outlined as Schedule A in the building for the future pupil accommodation review final staff report February 2017 pertain to a Category 1 school closure on consolidations by striking out September 2018 and inserting September 2020 as it relates to Oxford on the Rideau Public School. Trustee McPherson, you have a
Point of order, please. I do not see how this is covered under our current rules of parliamentary procedure. The issue in question is contained within the body of the report and not in the final motion. So I feel that we are doing something that contravenes the rules of parliamentary procedure that we were doing.
Trustee McPherson, I have, I'll be very honest with all the trustees, I have stressed over this decision. I have taken what you're saying into consideration. I've thought about this long and hard, being fully aware of our parliamentary procedures and our bylaws and what are the requirements for a motion such as this to come forward. The decision I made was to have this included in the agenda and move forward with this motion. So that's my position on it. It certainly can be challenged by the trustees at this point in time. If it's not challenged, then I'm going to go ahead with the motion. Okay, seeing it's not challenged, then we'll go ahead with the motion. I'm going to turn this over to Trustee Swan.
Okay, I'm bringing this amendment forward due to new information that wasn't available at our March 23rd, 2017 special meeting and new projections from the Upper Canada Board. Unfortunately, as we all know, there was a report with new projections on the public website yesterday, and it's no longer there, so I don't have those visuals for you. But the projections I'm referring to in the new information is the actual numbers of students in the North Grenville family of schools and in the North Grenville area has increased. The projections for the North Grenville family group of schools enrollment presented to us for 2017-18 back in, well, when we got the report in February, was 1,902 students. I phoned all the schools, Merrickville, Kempville Public, North Grenville District High School, Oxford-on-Rideau, and South Branch, and the actual enrollment is 1,947 students. I did this at the end of September, which is showing an increase of 45 students higher than the board projection. I feel this shows North Grenville is not in a position of declining enrollment at this time. Now, in the report that I printed off but is no longer on the website for visual, I just have some numbers. As the board numbers and my numbers actually agree that the enrollment this year is 1947. Though our numbers vary slightly for various schools, I'm sure there was some movement between different schools, but it all worked out. Whatever day they gathered their data, it's still agreeing with the numbers that I got. My numbers show the number of North Grenville District High School students increased by 39 students over projections. So an additional portable was added to South Branch in September 2017, bringing the total to 4. As well, they're utilizing 2 classrooms in the school. According to my numbers, South Branch is down 10 students in the elementary panel, which is nowhere near enough to house the students from Oxford. And we do not know yet the actual effects on the numbers when we're introducing the dual track French in 2018. This is why I'm asking for a change in the date. And also the reason for the date change is the projected decline is not until 2019, 2020 at South Branch in the board projections. According to board data, which varies slightly from my data, space utilization also went up in all Kempville schools. We did not have this information at the time because it's current information. North Grenville District High School went from 118% utilization to 121%. KPS went from 104% to 107% actual. South Branch went from 80% to 81%. The board number at South Branch was actually 2 students higher than the ones I was provided with when I said they've lost 10 students. The board information is saying they've only lost 8. The board collected for this year, the space utilization went from 94 to 95%, or the board information collected shows the space utilization went from 94 to 95% in the whole North Grenville family, even though the utilization at Oxford did go down from 35 to 30% as they lost 8 students. I'm pleased, I ask you please to support my amendment in changing the year from 2018 to 2020 so the Upper Canada Board can have more time to support their change projection increases in student enrollment at North Grenville High School and South Branch and thus find the best possible solutions for the placements of our students. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll open it up to comments or questions. Okay. Seeing there are no questions, the motion is on the table. Do I have it in front of me to read out again?
Just clarification.
Yes. Yes.
What's the current utilization rate of that school space?
Of the one where they're putting the kids in?
No, the Oxford, the current one that we voted originally to.
Right now, it's down to 30% from 35 last year. They lost some students. They went from 85 to 73, but we do have a board office there and Section 23s that aren't counted in that number.
So, future, how many kids would it take to get that up to over 60%?
Well,
do you know?
Well, I know that they're saying the capacity is 245. So if we're at 73, let's see, I don't know off the top of my head. Who's the mathematician?
Almost double it.
Almost double. Okay, thank you.
But all the other schools are clearly over capacity in the North Grenville.
Thank you. Okay, trustees, I have a motion before me that the Upper Canada District School Board amend the main motion adopted at the March 23rd, 2017 special meeting, that the recommendations as outlined as Schedule A in the Building for the Future Pupil Accommodation Review Final Staff Report, February 2017, pertaining to Category 1 schools closures and consolidations, by striking out September 2018 and inserting September 2020 as it relates to Oxford on the Rideau Public School. Can I ask you to cast your votes, please?
I'm in favor.
Thank you. And just for clarity, just make sure that a nay is not in support, a yay is in support of the motion, and sometimes that gets confusing.
So I want a yay.
You're a yay. Thank you very, very much.
Yeah, in support.
Thank you, Trustee McPherson.
Thank you.
And, Trustee Kartner? And it's not going to matter. That is defeated. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next is Director. Do you have any comments?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciated delivering the reports earlier.
In other words, you have no more to say? You run out? All right. You know, I think there's two things that I want to say. One is condolences that I do want to pass on right now to Dale Shannon's family. Dale Shannon was a former teacher, a former principal, a former superintendent in this board. He passed away suddenly at the age of 70. Our condolences go to him and his family. Dale was for lack of a better word, he was the real deal. When you talked to Dale, you knew you were talking to a real person. He lived life to the fullest. He loved to fish. He loved to do a lot of things, but he lived life to the maximum, and he's going to be sorely missed, but he made a huge contribution to this board over the years that he was here, and I really want to express our condolences on behalf of all of us. The other thing, you know, we only have really a couple more meetings, but we're sliding into, it's not hard to tell when we move into the outside into the community and you start to see the Christmas lights and all of those kind of things happening. And I want us all to be aware that this becomes a very stressful time of the year for some of our young people. For many kids, Christmas has to be the most exciting time in their life. For many of our kids whose families are struggling, it is an incredibly stressful time. And the one thing I had noted many, many times as a teacher is that when we were sending our kids off the Christmas holidays, we in our minds are thinking they're going off to the best 2 weeks of their life, when in many cases they are not. And I just want us to be aware that Christmas is a whole lot of things, but it's about caring for other people, and we have to be very mindful of our young people that struggle at this time of the year, because there are many of them out there. Okay, so moving forward, I need a motion that the Upper Canada District School Board move into Committee of the Whole, moved by Trustee John McAllister, seconded by Trustee Bill McPherson. Can I get you to cast your vote on that, please?
I'm in favor.
I'm in favor.
Thank you. And that carries. And the second motion is that the Committee of the Whole move into a private session, November 22nd, 2017, moved by Trustee Cram, seconded by Trustee McDonald. Cast your votes. That should carry.
Favor.
Thank you.
I'm in favor, I can't see it.
And that carries, and so we're moving into private session. Thank you very much, everyone.